Hi, this is Bruce Whipple, and welcome to the Business Acquisition Podcast. This is where we talk about how to acquire an already profitable business rather than build one from scratch. In the past 25 years, I've acquired several businesses, and I've also built several businesses from scratch. And I can tell you that it's a lot easier to do the former rather than the latter. You may know me from my association with Dan Peña, who I've worked with and been partners with for more than 25 years. Dan is gracious enough to mention me quite often in his videos, and it's been a real pleasure working with Dan, and one of the few people that I call a true friend. And actually, we've worked on many acquisitions together as well. And even though I said it was easier to acquire a business rather than build one from scratch, that doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. I often say that QLA is simple, but please don't make the mistake of thinking that simple is the same thing as easy. It still requires hard work. Okay, so today, let's talk about your ideal customer. We're going to pick an industry, but the first thing I like to look at is how do you focus on the customer, irrespective of the industry you're in. Too often we think about what's good for us, and candidly, your customers don't give a whit about what's good for you except how it helps them. You know, I often look at correspondence and it's me, as opposed to what's good for the person on the other end of that correspondence. So let's remember that first when we are looking for an industry. So how do you know what's important to your customers and clients? Well, that's a good question. One of the best I saw was to ask a series of questions that let you see who your avatar is. Avatar is just a word for your ideal customer, basically. And the more specific you can get with that, what that person looks like, what their age is, what their income is, what their likes and dislikes, their pains, and by that emotional pains, unless you're in the physical fitness or therapy business, and then you might be interested in their actual pains, but we're talking about their emotional pains. So how do you do that? You first begin to ask the questions that get you those answers. And these are a series of questions that I first saw when I worked with a good marketing person who gave me insight into just how important this step is. So let's talk about the avatar questions. First one is, what keeps them awake at night? Indigestion boiling up in their esophagus, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. That's a problem that they have to solve, and hopefully you are the answer to that problem. But the more specific you can get on that question, the better and more targeted your niche is going to be. What are they afraid of? An emotion that drives an awful lot of activity. So what do they fear in their life, in their business, in their relationship, et cetera, depending upon the type of business you are in. What are they angry about, and who are they angry at? Oftentimes a, quote, common enemy, unquote, can be an excellent place to begin to solve a problem and then provide a solution for that. A lot of people are angry about a lot of things. So what are the top 3 daily frustrations that they face? There's opportunity in those frustrations. There's opportunity for you to provide a solution for them. What trends are occurring and will occur in their business or lives? Looking down the turnpike to see what's happening, what will happen, etc. What do they secretly, ardently desire most? That can be a lot of things. In the fitness industry, for instance, it might be, and especially as people begin to look at their goals and set those goals, that they want to weigh a certain amount, or they want to be able to be fit to do something. Or in their business, they want to generate some revenue goal or take some other actions, or whatever that is. That depends on the person. And again, it goes back to, as clearly as you can, defining that avatar. Is there a built-in bias to the way they make decisions? For example, engineers are exceptionally analytical. I was a trained engineer, but I chose not to pursue that line of work. But do they have a bias in the way they make decisions? And that's important. You know, there are different types of personalities. If you ever looked at a Myers-Briggs series of tests, it tells you basically the 4, although they've morphed that into more than that, but the basic 4 personality types. what's important to them, how do they make decisions, what do they like, what don't they like. That's a great exercise if you've never been through it. Do they have their own language? That doesn't mean, do they speak English or do they speak French, but do they talk in terminology? Oftentimes in the tech world, it's amazing when I talk to people who rattle off terms or acronyms that nobody else understands. So just remember who you're talking to, how to communicate with them, what language is important to them, what phrases, et cetera, et cetera. Who else is selling something similar to them and how? That's just a case of understanding what the marketplace is, who else is in this space, what are their solutions, et cetera, et cetera. Who else has tried selling to them something similar, and how has that effort failed? Knowing what doesn't work oftentimes is as important as knowing what does work. So if you can identify what their pain points are, what their needs are, but what hasn't worked in the past, you can eliminate that solution. So basically what you're doing is you're finding the pain points and you're solving them. So why is that important in picking an industry? Or why is that understanding important in picking an industry? Well, a couple of reasons. Why it's important in acquisitions, which is what we're talking about in these podcasts, acquiring a business, is that oftentimes the best way to acquire a business is not to go after a business which is for sale. Business brokers have tons of businesses for sale, but everybody and their brother potentially is looking at those businesses to purchase. And I really like to avoid business brokers in this process. I like the idea of going for businesses that aren't for sale. And if you know their pain points, you'd be surprised at their reaction sometimes on being approached. And oftentimes what I used to do was write basically letters to acquisition targets. I would explain what our dream team was, what our plan was, why they might be interested. And frequently, when I got on the telephone with them, they would end up saying to me, I never thought about selling the business. I don't have an exit plan. My kids don't want the business. I don't know how to sell a business. I just end up working so much in the business that I never really think about how to work on the business and how to make a transition process from that. And that's really important. It's interesting. When I sent those letters, and I had a ridiculously high response rate. Usually you get a 2 or 3% response rate from direct mail. When I sent those letters targeted, and they were well-written letters, and we can provide a template. If you're interested in having that template, just let me know. I would get on the phone with the person, and they would end up saying to me, well, I never thought about selling the business, but when can we meet? When can we talk? And certainly that was a result of me touching on some pain points that they maybe didn't take the time to think about previously, but now we're thinking about it. They were thinking about, how do I get a transition out of this business? Where do I eventually, if I want to retire, where do I retire from this business? How do I retire from this business? And if you can provide a solution to those issues that they are thinking about, you'd be amazed at how many businesses that aren't for sale certainly become for sale. We also provided some liquidity in those discussions so that they were potentially part of a bigger opportunity that just didn't mean that they were part of their current business they were running. So those are all really important. And we're going to talk next about how you choose an industry. But this is critical to how you choose an industry, how you decide what works, how you decide what doesn't work with respect to your customer, what's happened before. Go through all those avatar questions, and let me just repeat them quickly once again. So the avatar questions were, what keeps them awake at night? Indigestion boiling up in their esophagus, eyes open staring at the ceiling. What are they afraid of? What are they angry about, or who are they angry at? What are their top 3 frustrations daily? What trends are occurring and will occur in their business or lives? What do they secretly, ardently desire most? Really important. Is there a built-in bias to the way they make decisions? For example, engineers exceptionally analytical. Do they have their own language? And again, that's technology-dependent language oftentimes. Who else is selling something similar to them and how? Who else has tried selling them something similar and how has that effort failed? So if you can end up answering those questions, you should at the end of that process get to where you can literally close your eyes and picture the person, what they look like, what their age is, what their economic position is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the more you can target that avatar, the more successful you'll be if you do the work. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Looking forward to the next podcast where we'll talk about how to pick the industry. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments or ideas for future episodes, please email bruce@brucewhipple.com. And if you're not already on our mailing list, head over to brucewhipple.com and sign up and grab any of the free reports. That'll put you on the mailing list. There is a lot of free information you can use to acquire already profitable businesses. This is Bruce Whipple. Thanks for listening to the Business Acquisition Podcast. And remember, you miss 100% of the opportunities you failed to take. And procrastination truly is the thief of time. So do something today, please. Your future self will be proud of you.